And I'm very pleased to say that Thérèse Coffey, Work and Pensions Secretary, is here with me now. Welcome to you, first of all.
Good morning.
We just ran through the latest growth figures. They show a contraction for the last 3 months, a sign, perhaps, of what's to come, warnings of a deep recession heading our way as well. So in the midst of all of this, where is the government?
Well, it is concerning, and of course the Bank of England also forecast a deeper recession than perhaps had been anticipated as well. And that's why we need, I think, with Liz as Prime Minister, to change course and to get a plan for growth, an element of reducing taxes, both for working people, but also not putting up more corporation taxes, which can be a drain on investment into companies and businesses and people in order to get that growth. So I am concerned about it, but nevertheless, we have to keep to try and make sure we do what we can to get rid of unnecessary regulations, particularly those from the EU, to get Britain moving again. That's
Liz Truss's plans for the future. You're in the government now. Why is the government not doing more now to lay out plans to help people?
Well, in terms of, in June, we legislated for a package of support, just about £15 billion this year. And that is already underway. My own department was giving support to people on benefits last month. We started doing the first part of the cost of living payment. And of course, things are changing. That's why government is getting ready. The Prime Minister met energy companies yesterday. We're already doing work. But of course, we need to wait formally for Ofgem to report at the end of the month. And then we can take further steps potentially. But I think importantly overall, this reason I'm supporting Liz is to get that growth, is to make sure that people have more money in their own pocket instead of waiting for government to do these schemes and pay people back.
OK, and I'll come on to those plans a little bit later, but I'm talking about right now. You mentioned that meeting yesterday with Boris Johnson and some of the energy chiefs, but they weren't all there, were they? Some of the big players weren't there. BP and Shell weren't there. And at the end of it, no announcement, no action taken. So what was the point of it? Was it all about being seen to be doing something?
No, I think it's recognising that, of course, what people rely on in terms of some of the changes that may need to be made. It's important that the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Energy Secretary have those direct conversations. I'm very conscious of the ongoing investment that still needs to be made in the energy industry in order to help us move towards net zero in the future. But understandably, right now, some of our challenges are global. But some of our challenges, we need to make sure we increase the energy security and resilience of this country, so we're not reliant on just what is happening to world gas prices, but also further changes that may be needed in the market and the regulation as well.
Well, yes, I'm sure there are important discussions that are being had, but don't people deserve to know now whether or not they're going to be facing higher bills with no support in the autumn? I mean, a lot of people are very anxious and very stressed. Some of the most vulnerable people that you represent as Work and Pensions Secretary, don't they need to have some action spelt out now?
Well, we have already set in place. I took legislation through Parliament in June, and we've already started making those payments. Every household will be getting support next month toward their cost of the energy bills.
Enough, is it?
Well, I'm conscious that people are seeing these numbers in the news. Ofgem is due to report at the end of this month. I think it's important to say government is working already to consider potential options that could be taken forward in order to potentially offer more support. But overall, as I say, the approach from the person I want to be the next Prime Minister is to allow people to keep more of their own money. So removing that national insurance increase, making sure that's in their pockets rather than coming into government and then coming back out through schemes as a general approach. But nevertheless, there is support right now. And if we are going to change that, then I would need to take further legislation through Parliament in the autumn to make any changes.
How does the reversal of the national insurance rise help the most vulnerable? How does it help people on benefits? How does it help pensioners? How does it help people that don't earn enough to qualify to pay it in the first place?
Well, in terms of people on very low incomes, they're already part of the support package that is there now. As I say,
which falls short of the rises that we're anticipating in energy prices.
Well, indeed, and Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor, set this on the basis of future forecasts of where we would be. I appreciate we're in a different place now, but I wasn't given powers to be able to make ad hoc changes to payments that we were to be given out. That wasn't allowed within government, so we set forward our legislation, and that's why, if the options that need to be considered are being drawn up now, but it's important that we wait for that aspect from Ofgem, just like we did in the past, and came forward with appropriate support. But the overall focus, I think, for future is about how we can reduce taxes, keep more money in people's pockets. But nevertheless, the government, just as it has in the past, is there and all options will be considered.
All options will be considered. Will there be direct intervention to help the worse off under a Liz Truss government, were she to win?
Well, we've already had direct intervention that's underway,
and
still
to meet
more money is still due to come through, and that is already in train for more money to go to every household. But it's important that Liz makes that, if she is the Prime Minister, gets those options that are being worked up across government and makes that considered approach. And, Liz represents a constituency where the average earnings or the median earnings are lower than that in the city of Liverpool. She knows what it's like for hard-working households who are struggling with cost of living. I experienced that in my role as an MP, as well as being Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. And that's why these measures are being worked up and they will be considered. But it's important that instead of making policy on the hoof, that, a considered Prime Minister will wait for the advice that comes and then be able to make a judgment on what it needs to be done and what level of support may be needed.
OK, well, let's look at benefits, because that's your remit. Will Liz Truss use universal credit? Could she be prepared to use universal credit as a way to help out some of the poorer households when they're hit by these higher bills? Her own campaign manager, Ian Duncan-Smith, told us on this programme yesterday that he thinks it's the best way to offer support for the most vulnerable. Rishi Sunak wants to use the benefit system that way too. So why?
Well, we already are. We already are using the benefit system, and that will be one of the options that is being considered. And as I say, the next Prime Minister will need to make a judgment on what levers to use and what level of support to be offered. But as I say, we've already paid out to over 7 million people just last month, part of the cost of living payment. More is coming next month, whether it's for all households, for pensioners, for people with disabilities. So it's a package that is gradually being rolled out. But I understand, and this is why government is working on options, but it's important that that is done in a considered way, thinking about the different levers, thinking about whether reducing people's corporate income tax is the quickest way, or indeed removing the national insurance increases that have been
but handouts
increased.
Are still a possibility.
Absolutely, every option will be considered in terms of support schemes that may be needed in whether it's a targeted way or the general way of reducing removing that national insurance increase, which Liz is absolutely committed to do in an emergency budget.
But people have to wait and see for at least another month whether they'll get help or not if Liz Truss were to win.
Well, people are going to get help. I think it's about what change in help may be needed, but help is already being given and will be given in the future as well.
We're seeing extraordinary temperatures across the country for the second time in a month. We're also seeing drought conditions across many parts of the country as well. Is this climate change?
I think it's certainly more evidence, if people needed it, of the impact of what is happening when extreme weather events with our gradually changing climate change, which is why it's important to keep our focus on achieving net zero. But in the short term, in terms of we've seen an increase in investment in trying to reduce water leakages and similar. We're not going back to the 70s. There's been a lot of investment since then where there wasn't money put into infrastructure. But nevertheless, I'm conscious that we all need to do our bit, and indeed the water companies need to continue to do their bit to reduce unnecessary leakages and to make sure that we have enough water so when people turn the taps on, it isn't the problem.
Liz Truss has committed to the net zero target, but on the other hand, she's also called solar farms the most depressing side. She won't rule out more North Sea drilling, and she's talked about, or she's plans to scrap the green levy on our energy bills. I mean, it sounds pretty inconsistent.
Well, I think it's about having a moratorium on the green levy, which adds about £150, £160 to people's energy bills, and to fund elements of that through general spending rather than putting it on energy bills. So that's one way to help households directly with the cost of living, particularly at this challenging time. But I'm very conscious. I'm MP in the East of England, going through these challenges right now, with whether it's about farmers or households, and it is a problem. And that's why unlocking regulations so we get more investment into things like reservoirs, into improvements to water supplies. Those are the sorts of things, if we can get more private investment in, by getting rid of some of the European regulations that we have, those sorts of things will start to make it easier to secure that investment and have that long-term approach in improving our water infrastructure, but also other utilities as well.
OK, Thérèse Coffey, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed.